Oh, it's going against this wall. Cool. Okay. Hello, my name is Mike Roth. I am actually one of the backend developers at HBC, and I'm really, really happy to see those of you who came to our second meetup. So this is, again, a big milestone for us. We really appreciate you coming out and to see that you guys are showing interest. And without further ado, we will go right into it. We have a few trivia questions. Just to kind of get it started, loosen up a little bit. Does anybody know who created Git? All right, yeah.
Linus Torvalds?
That's correct. You get it. Right.
So you gotta create a list.
Other side of the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Does anybody know who? Does anybody know what Git means? There's a limit of one. All right. Okay, we'll move on to the other question. Oh, yes, Greg.
So it's an insult. It's an insult in British, basically saying somebody's an idiot.
That's absolutely right.
Absolutely right.
And does anybody know the difference between scale out and scale up? Yeah, please. Alana, right? Nice to meet you.
To scale out would be like to broaden and like add more to something, and then scale up would be to improve.
Yeah. Great. Cool, guys. So without further ado, we've got a great meetup tonight. Two presenters. And the first is one of the principal front-end developers from the DSG team. His name is Joshua Glassman.
All right. Hello. So, as mentioned, Joshua, I'm principal developer for HBC. HBC is a parent company for these different banners. We call them banners or stores, so if you hear us say banner, then that's what we mean. My team at HBC is responsible for Lord & Taylor in Hudson's Bay. You've probably heard of Lord & Taylor. Hudson's Bay is a retailer primarily in Canada. And I will say that working under so many retail companies, I can say with a straight face, we are probably the best dressed tech group in the world. We don't have a strict dress code, but there's still guys that wear jeans and t-shirts, but you can bet that they are the highest end jeans and t-shirts from the best designers. They're the discount. And just some more trivia for you. Hudson's Bay was incorporated in 1670, making it the oldest corporation in North America and one of the oldest in the world. But anyways, you're not here for history, you're here for programming! Yay! All right, so let's get into it. So exploring scalable and modular architectures for the front end, that's our topic. We're going to bring you through some of the things that we're doing under these banners, some of the conventions that we're following, and just to give you some visibility into all the great things that our programmers and our tech people are up to. So when we talk about scalable architecture, there's a lot of things that we can cover. There's so much with JavaScript and all the different frameworks. So there's a lot we can say about scalable architecture. But in the interest of time, we're going to keep it mostly tailored towards CSS. So if you were hoping that we covered JavaScript or something else, sorry, we have a lot of these meetups, so we'll split the topics up into more. But even with CSS, there's still a lot that we can cover. So we still want to talk to you though. So if you have ideas, and if you're doing any projects, or if you're working on anything that you want to talk to us, then come up to us, talk to us. We want to mix it up with you. We want to hear about what you're doing too. So I'm going to call out Michael Richard. This is Michael Richard. This is our Director of Front-End Development. So he knows everything there is to know about everything in the front-end space. So I have a beer for anyone that can stump Michael Richard. And he's gonna hate me for calling him out like that, so I'm probably fired, and maybe you'll get a job too. So anyways, when we talk about scalable and architectural and modular, what exactly do we mean? So this is just a very basic example. This is a basic example of a file structure for Backbone. And this is just kind of gives you a sense of, when we speak of architecture, you can just see right away that there's a form to it, there's an order to it. We have a CSS folder up top. It's separated into assets, minified, non-minified. There's a place for templates. Everything has a place on where it goes. The JavaScript is split up into like a typical Backbone application. You have a folder for libraries. There's models and collections, views, and it has kind of like an order and a structure to it, so that as your project grows, or as you add more people to it, or it's an easy way to set up something that can be expanded and build upon with a sense of order. So we can apply those concepts to CSS. And when we talk about CSS architecture, these are the programming paradigms that I'm going to mention or go over. Not just CSS though. We can also apply these concepts to preprocessors such as SAS or LESS. But the basic goal is just to bring order and structure to how you're building your projects. So, but before we get into the different paradigms, we can sort of summarize, what they're trying to accomplish into some core principles. Each approach has kind of like its own way of doing things, but all of them pretty much address the same issues. Some of these issues you might find that you've already been using. You might have already been following these conventions. You might be familiar with codifying your CSS in a certain way to get the benefit from them without even knowing it. And that's sort of like the point, is to follow conventions. And once you have a convention down, then it's easy to follow and easy to build on. And you sort of do it without thinking. So structure and inform, what does that really mean? When we're talking about structure and inform, we're talking about like indicating structure through naming convention, having a naming convention on how you're going to name your classes and how classes are going to be set up and follow that. We're categorizing styles in a style sheet. If we group the styles into one style sheet or into multiple style sheets. We can group classes together by what they're trying to accomplish. We can organize our pages with grids to follow a convention so that the pages follow a certain structure. We want to reduce. We want to eliminate inline styles. Inline styles are obviously bad practice. They're horrible for scalability. So we want to get rid of those. We want to shorten the chain of elements in our selectors to the least possible to reduce the amount of code that we're writing. And we want to choose classes over IDs. IDs are one-to-one, classes are many-to-many. So we can have one class and apply it many times. So recycle and reuse. What does this mean? We're leveraging cascading style sheets. We're taking the principles of cascading style sheets and making it work for us. We're modularizing components into self-contained components that can be reused throughout your site, throughout your project. And we're extending, we're setting up subclassing so that those modules can then be extended further. So if you have a component, you can add a class to it so that it has different theming or different colors. And we're creating generic classes so that they can be applied in that way to our modules or whatever we're doing. So dry CSS. So with all of those core concepts in mind, what are some of the approaches to doing these things? Dry CSS is one of them. It's based on the don't repeat yourself principle of software development. And with dry CSS, the core concept is grouping, so that we're grouping classes together. We're creating groups of selectors with shared properties rather than repeating the property value pairs for each selector. This allows us to keep HTML untouched. It promotes design practices and uniform updates. And we can edit a group so that it affects all of its members of the group. And organizing in this way allows us to organize by categories, colors, text, shape, structures, and modules. So, best practices, boring. Now we get into some actual code. So this is just an example implementation of dry CSS. We can see that we're grouping the properties onto what they're trying to accomplish, and then we're naming the groups logically. So the first one we're adding a white background, and then the second one we're adding a medium white background. And then we're adding selectors to all of these groups so that the groups are applied to all the selectors that need these different value property pairs. And we can take these concepts and we can apply them to preprocessors. So this is an implementation of dry CSS in Sass. On the left, we can see that we're using the extend directive. So this is maybe not the best solution, but just just to illustrate the point. There's a lot of different things that Sass gives us, like mixins, so we can take these concepts and expand them further. But for example, then we can see that how dry CSS can be applied to Sass. And what the extend director does is it takes a style sheet and says, I want selector A to be styled like selector B. So that then separates selector A with selector B, allow them to share selector B's properties and write the remaining properties like normal. So you can see that we have couch, and then it extends couch, and then the Sass will take that and group them together and apply these conventions. So object-oriented CSS. This is another convention that we can follow, another paradigm. What this does is takes CSS, it creates like objects that are represented as a repeating visual pattern that can be abstracted into independent snippets of HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. And then that object can then be reused around a site. And what we do with these repeating visual patterns, like a background or border styles, is separate skins so that you can then mix and match the various objects or abstract the, what we're really doing is abstracting the structure and the positioning from the presentation styles. And it also limits location-dependent styles. So the styles are not applied to only one location, so that they're reusable. So an object, no matter where you put an object, the styles are not dependent on a container, or it could be used and reused anywhere. So this is an example of object-oriented CSS. And you can see this is like one example of just like a header class. And then, but using object-oriented, what we do is we take out the structure, the CSS, and we add it to a global width class. And then header inside is then just our presentation. And then we can take this global width class and then add it throughout, and it's reusable. And this is another example of object-oriented CSS. So now what we're doing is we're free to use these styles on any elements that require the same characteristics by simply adding that class to the desired element without a single extra line of CSS. And this pattern right now is a common called a media object. And you might have been already using this, this kind of coding pattern without even realizing it. So class.media is an object, and the goal is to make that object independent of its surroundings so that it can be placed anywhere of your site. Just like this. So this is a popular example of the media object, and you might recognize the Facebook feed. You've probably been using this kind of convention already without knowing about it. But you might not have known that this was actually an invented concept by Nicole Sullivan. So you can see here on the Facebook feed all the areas that we're reusing this media object around the Facebook feed. I actually have a laser pointer. I really wanted to use that. Okay, so BEM. BEM is another coding paradigm that applies these core principles. And what are we doing with BEM? BEM takes, first and foremost, it tries to apply fast development so that projects can be created quickly with an architecture that ensures maintainability and longevity for further development. So it tries to apply these concepts to projects so that you can expand on them and build on them easily and fast. It wants to efficiently organize people's work in a team. Teams require, teams typically consist of a lot of people working in tandem. So it wants to take these concepts and make that efficient. Adding more people to a team should improve the team's performance. It should not be considered a hindrance. So a process must be in place that ensures that new developers are brought up to speed quickly. And if you're following a convention, then you can do that. This is an example implementation of BEM. BEM actually stands for Block Element Modifier, and the BEM class starts with a block that is an object name, and then you can see that with byline. Then for children of that block, you add an element separating with 2 underscores, right here. And then finally, you can modify the class, the block or element, by adding a modifier separated with 2 hyphens. So we get byline hyphen name, byline or byline underscore name, byline hyphen expanded, or byline hyphen expanded underscore bio. And then this is also an implementation of the media object that we just saw using BEM. But a common complaint about BEM is ugly, because you got all these underscores and hyphens all over the place. And this is an implementation. We can take these concepts and apply it to SAS. What SAS gives us is we can use some of the tools that SAS gives us with nesting with BEM modules using the ampersand to prefix our elements or modifiers. Finally, my favorite. So this is another paradigm that we can use. I like this one the best. Not because of the name, which is pronounced smacks, but basically what this does is it's sort of a more intuitive way to structure your CSS, your SAS, your LESS, whatever you're using. You start with a base, and these are all the default styles, usually fonts or colors or setting up the body, and then you have a layout which divides the page into sections that usually hold modules together. And then you have your modules, which are reusable parts, things that you can add to different layouts or different pages. And they're all self-contained, so the modules have their own styles within themselves. And moving them from container to container doesn't necessarily change the module's look or feel unless you want it to. Because modules can also have a state. So you're adding a state to the modules so that, if you add a state class to a module, then you can change its layout or its presentation. And then finally, Smacks gives you themes. So the pages can have themes. Everything can be themed. And this is an example implementation of Smacks. So up at the top here, we have, we're including our libraries, which is Compass. We have tools that we're using, our base style, and our layouts, modules, and everything is included in their own style sheet files, and it's in they're following naming conventions and categorization of classes. So, following these conventions, what exactly are we doing? My group, Lord and Taylor in Hudson's Bay, we are currently on Backbone and Sass and Gulp, and we're trying to change everything to spaghetti code. We're going to upgrade to Dojo, CSS, and Grunt. Wait, that's backwards. So we're currently using Dojo, CSS, Grunt, and we're moving our systems towards some more modern frameworks. We've already got a Sass implementation in place. We've upgraded our build process to use Gulp, and we're slowly moving towards Backbone. And this, while we're talking about CSS, an important part is what are you supporting? So just by coincidence, both Lord and Taylor and Hudson's Bay pretty much have the same, our users are using kind of like the same browsers, and these are our analytics. So Safari is the most popular, followed by Internet Explorer 11. You will notice that Internet Explorer IE 8 is not here, thank God. But Sax does support IE 8, so I'm not on that team. So these are kind of the things that we're developing for, and those are sort of the concepts that we're looking at and applying to our code. If you have used any of them or you're using them currently, then we would love to hear about it. And that's all I have for Lord and Taylor and Spade.
Thanks, Joshua. So I should also have just previously mentioned that we have quite a few banners that we support here at HBC. I mentioned DSG without realizing I didn't explain it. DSG is what we call a department store group. That's essentially our Lord and Taylor and the Bay. We also have Off Fifth and Sax.com. And Off Fifth is the outlet store for Sax Fifth Avenue. So there's, again, a very wide variety of technologies and softwares used on all the front and back ends of all of those teams. And Joshua specifically is working on the department store group banners, which have a very unique and exciting challenge right now, being that they are sort of in the beginning stages for us. And so they are some of the most exciting banners to work on at the moment. Just by raise of hands, who was here at the last meetup? I see. Okay, so I know I recognize some people's faces. That's great. Next, we have Christian Munoz, who is our esteemed Sax Off Fifth front-end dev manager.
Thank you. I really appreciate that you guys are here. This is awesome. Thank you for your support. Okay, me. I'm Christian Munoz, and I am the front-end manager, the manager for the front-end engineering team at saxoff5.com. Over the years, the one thing that really drives me about the things that I do is that to build high-quality software, high-quality code that adds value to someone's life. If it doesn't add value to someone's life, it really means nothing else. It just means nothing, right? What's the point of what we're doing? But how do we measure quality software? We have some core principles at Saxoff. There's core principles that we like to follow. But how do we apply this to CSS? When back in the days, maybe you would say, not even back in the days, even today, I think people even consider a good CSS developer maybe some guy that's able to grab a mock-up, replicate that into awesome code. Maybe he doesn't use too many images. He doesn't use tables to create layout. And and maybe if he's really good, then he uses the latest and greatest techniques. He uses stuff like transitions and transformations in CSS or media queries. But nowadays, our applications are larger. And as our application grows, Also, so does our complexity. And architecturing things like CSS, which is not really built in that sense. CSS is just a very simple language, and it's very easy to use. If you don't architecture right from the beginning, your site is just going to fall apart. As you start adding more features into it, it becomes more difficult to deal with. And then sometimes you change something on one end, and then you don't even know that another page was broke because you made a change. And I'm sure if we have developers in the room here that we have gone through that before. And so out of fifth, what we try to do is define what the principles are. What are the principles of building quality CSS, quality software, quality JavaScript? It applies to the same language, to any language. It's agnostic to the language that you use. So the first thing is we like to write predictable code, right? It's important that when you change like a CSS component, that suddenly doesn't change a component somewhere else in another page. It should only change the component that you intended to change. It should also be reusable, right? Your CSS should definitely be reusable. You should definitely build components that are abstract and decouple enough from your code that you can reuse them to build other components from them. And then you shouldn't have to solve problems that you have already solved, right? If I have already built a button class, if I built a widget, a weather widget, and I needed to incorporate that into my code that maybe had other components around it, why should I go and now redo my work, resolve my problem, the problem that I already solved? It should be maintainable. If you add a new feature to your code, it shouldn't require you to refactor your code. It just makes things harder. It makes it more difficult to be turn around, will take longer to deliver something. It should also be scalable. As your application grows, so will the developers that you bring into your team. And if you build something, what does that mean, scalable? It means that the code should be easier to maintain regardless of how many developers are working on it. You can have a single developer working with your code or a whole large engineering team working on it. It should be easier for them to maintain that code. And it should also be easy to learn. Because you're going to hire new guys. You're going to hire people coming in and they're going to look at your code. You want them to engage, approach that code easily. It should be easy for them to learn the code without too much trouble. And it should be high performance, for sure, right? Definitely the experience should be smooth. It shouldn't be too difficult to the customer, the experience. It should be very fast. So, but the problem is delivering quality code, delivering quality software takes time. And if you're like us, we move very fast, right? We want to get an idea and deliver the idea. We want to put it out the door to the customer's hands as soon as possible and start creating value right away. So how do you build high quality in less time? How do you build high quality CSS in less time? So what we found is that, there is principles, right? You can't change time. Time is a constant and so will quality. What you can do is just push that, change that a little bit by doing it right from the beginning. So what we do out of fifth is that we like to, follow the principles, and that allows us to build better software better. Thank you. That's awesome. Automatic. So that allows us to build software right away. Software that is quality from the beginning. So make it your default thing to do. So what best practices do we use out of fifth? First of all, the first thing is you want to make sure your CSS selectors are intentional, right? You want to avoid using complicated selectors. So for example, here's our off-fifth mobile site, right? We were challenged with this section of the page, which is just a recursive off-campus navigation. And a CSS developer might have approached this way. Hey, yeah, let's create this component here. It's wrapped on the nav, and why not just use HTML base tags? Why not? And then use some selectors, child selectors, and keep my HTML clean, right? That's what you're looking for. Yeah, let's do some clean HTML, put all the code in the CSS. But then the problem is that doesn't scale, right? Why? Well, first of all, it's not predictable. So if somebody in your team went and decided, hey, that div, could be better for SEO for some reason if we use a section tag instead from HTML5. And then he went ahead and changed that div to section. What happens when he deploys that code and then previews it? Boom, the page is broken. Why? Because your CSS is so tightly coupled to the div that you can't, it just won't work. So what you expected didn't happen. And then on top of that, it's not reusable at all. If I wanted to take this component here, maybe it would be, I don't know, maybe the first LI here. If I wanted to reuse this look somewhere else in another page, I wouldn't be able to do that. Because it's so tight, I will either have to copy the same HTML structure, which obviously is not reusable, or put my selector next to this one, and then copy the properties from my CSS. That's definitely not reusable. And it's definitely not maintainable. The fact that the HTML is so constant is not maintainable. You can't maintain this thing. So how do we make it better? So out of fifth, what we did is we identified the different components in this section of the page, and then thought about what components in this widget here is reusable. So we identify a few of them actually. First of all, this is our catalog navigation. But within this catalog navigation, we have other things that we reuse across different pages. And if you go to our mobile site, you'll see that this thing is actually in the footer, and you'll find it in every other pages as well. So we found out that buttons are so commonly used, it applies to every single element on our site. So you will notice a lot of buttons on the site. And what you'll see is that our buttons are abstracted enough that we can reduce it. But really what this is just a button with a list view, and the list view just organizes the button. It lays out the button this way, and then it creates the borders, the division between them. And then we have collapsible items. So if you notice this thing here, it's just a collapsible component. So when you tap on this element, it reveals this other element. So we're able to incorporate the collapsible in other sections on other pages on the site as well. So that's kind of how you want to build your CSS. On top of that, it's not HTML. It's not depending on the HTML structure. Here, nothing here tells you there's HTML structure behind this, right? So you can use this anywhere. You can grab any element in the HTML and make it a button, and you can be confident that that is what's going to happen, right? And then you're not going to get some other weird look about, for the button. And you can be confident that if you use a collapsible element, that will be a collapsible element. Or at least it will give you the base styles, because we do have some JavaScript that modifies the state. But at least you get the base look of it. And this is pretty much what the semantics, the HTML semantics for this looks like. So some people will argue, well, this is too verbose. But you're really adding, another developer comes in here, he immediately identified the intention of each element just by looking at the name. Even though it's verbose, you can't see it. You can definitely feel what was going on, what the developer was doing here. You don't just jump into a page and not know what's going on. And that's bad, right? You don't want to promote that in your team, because then you cripple the team. You will try to get the guy that really knows how the site works to make this work for you. And that decreases the production of your site, right? You won't be able to deliver stuff out the door as fast as possible. So another principle that we try to follow is we namespace our classes. So we avoid overly generic class names. So what does that look like? So for example, in our site, we have this other section in the store locations. A developer could have come here and built the HTML this way. He could have said, well, here's a store location page, a store location element, and let me just call this logo, and let me call this the address, and let me call this the pipe list, and let me call this the hours. And then the intentions here are to encapsulate the different components within a store. And the assumption is, hey, okay, well, if I do nesting, then I have nothing to worry about, because my nesting is going to protect my code. At least until Shadow DOM is not out, we can't be confident about this. But the right way to do it is to actually use a concept of BEM, which is you have the block element, which we have chosen here is the O5 store, and then your sub-elements just pretty much use that as a prefix of their name. So for example, here you can see office store logo, right? And then the store address, pipe list, store hours, and our CSS then is very clean. It's not nested. It's reusable. And then you won't have the problem where something like a logo can be easily contaminated by another CSS code that somebody else built down the road. Because remember, you're going to have a bunch of files. People are not going to know what's in the page. So some guy out there is going to create a logo class and affect your code, and then they're not going to realize until the release is out. Maybe QA manually identifies it, or somehow through some functional test. I mean, lately they've been doing a lot of visual testing and stuff like that, but that's just lately, right? most companies are probably using just manual tests to identify presentation problems. Another thing is you want to separate your concerns. So something, for example, like a button, which is easy to illustrate. You don't want to make too many assumptions. You just want to make sure that the button looks like a button every single time. What you don't want to do is stuff like putting layout information. Like my button should always be separated by 10 pixels from the top and bottom, or my button should be floated to the right or the left, because then it's very difficult to reuse. Right? So for example, out of Fifth, in our store location site, we identify a single component in the store locator. This is the mobile site. And this is the page title. We realized that every single page, almost every single page had a page title this way. It's styled the same way. So we were able to reuse that across the different applications. But then we also realized that some of them have buttons on the side. Some of them will have the button on the left, some of them will have the button on the right. So here you can see how we make no assumption of the layout of the button, right? This is just a button. So it should have no appearance in mobile, and there's a background and stuff like that, the border, just the style, just how the look and feel of a button is like in Office. And then there's some states here, and to scroll, I will have to go all the way down there. So, but really then you have like the state, like if it's active, you change the background color a little bit. If it's disabled, you dim it a little bit, stuff like that. And then what you do is, then you take like a layout class. You can either do a layout. If you do SMAX, then you can do a layout. And then within that layout, you say, well, this button is floated to the left. Because then you can float the button in different locations. It really depends sometimes on where you put it in the button. But at least you can be confident that your button will always look the same. And in this instance, for example, what we did is, since we identified that a title bar can have a button, what we did is made it a module, made it a sub-element of the module. So what we did here is a little coupled to the HTML. So now I'm going to have to go back and open an issue about this. But yeah, so you have a button. We're saying like the first button is always going to be floated to the left. Well, not floated, but it's going to be positioned absolutely to the left of the page title, and then positioned to the right of the page title. So what this does is it becomes very reusable, right? Which is what we want to do. We want to write very reusable code. So I can grab this element and put it in any other page, and just all I have to do is change the text. And I can easily just write a page that meets our standards, right? That meets our styles easily just by following the semantics, maybe, and then just dropping the CSS, the classes that I need, and that will improve the turnaround of the pages that I built. And it's just about getting familiar to the different components that you have. Then another thing that you want to do is, another thing that's great about BEM is you want to use modifiers. So, for example, again, the button example. First time here's a requirement, I want you to build a page for me. And you realize, oh, here's a button. I want to make it reusable. So I'm going to create a button class, and then you realize, oh, the button looks like, what color did I pick here? White and black border. This is what my button looks like. And then suddenly another requirement comes in, and it's like, oh, well, in a sidebar now, I need the button to be blue, right? And then what you do is just, oh, okay, well, let me find a common parent, or you create a selector, and then you target that button that way, and you say, well, let me make it blue there. And then, oh, now in the homepage, all of a sudden, it's a lot of editorials, and for some reason, they want to use red because it's nice. Maybe it's Valentine's Day. And then you go and change the button in the homepage, and you say every button in the homepage should be red. But the problem with this is that, again, the code, first of all, is not very predictable. Somebody comes in, think about it. First of all, it's not true that you will see the code this way, right? You will not see the button, and then you'll see sidebar button right behind it, right after. While you'll see this in another file, you probably don't even know about it. You're a new developer, you come into a company, and then you realize, well, this guy has buttons, that's great. So I can use a button anywhere that I want, right? And then you start using buttons in different pages. And then for some reason, a page that you needed has a sidebar. And you go ahead and you create a sidebar element, and you put a button there, boom, oh, what the hell, why is it blue? Right? So it's unpredictable, right? That's not the result that you were expecting to get. So, and it's also not very reusable, right? So if you wanted to make the button blue somewhere else, you will either have to follow the same semantic HTML, the same sidebar, and then followed by a button to make that work, or you will again have to go create another selector, and add that selector here, yet loading your CSS somewhere. So what we do instead is we use modifiers in BEM. So, but we don't really use BEM because of the same reason that Josh mentioned. We feel that BEM is very ugly syntax when it comes to the syntax, although I do get the idea behind BEM. You want to create that separation. You want to know what is a modifier and what really is a block and what really is the sub-element. But we don't do that. Somehow, it just works. It's easy for us to identify these things. So we can tell, and we also use comments. So you can also see like what are the modifiers. But it's also very trivial on a button. Some widgets are more complicated than a button. But here's the idea. The idea is, yeah, you create a button, you create the base styles for that. This is what the button should look like. And then, for example, in our team, we have different, and this is very common even in Bootstrap, if you use Bootstrap or Foundation. We have different contextual visual semantics. So, for example, we have a primary button that we use in our Fib, is this dark gray. And then on top of that, we have like, depending on the state, like if you have a button that's like, like something that you should be careful about, like a danger zone, then you can use like the red button for that, right? That's what the purpose of that is. Obviously, you have to use like some kind of text as well that represents that. But then it doesn't have to be just color. You can also change how the button looks. For example, here we have an inline button. In Office, our mobile buttons by default are block elements, so they stretch and take over the space of or whatever the parent element is. Because in mobile, mobile you just want to be able to tap with your hand. We don't make them small by default, but you can have it the other way around as well. And then we have like the button full, so pretty much no borders on the side. And there's a lot more. We have buttons that are links, so have no border, no background. They're just text, and they just give you a nice surface area where you can tap. So you want to organize your CSS into logical structures. We follow SMAX, and Josh already covered most of it, but this is an idea of what our folder structure looks like. We support two different, we do adaptive design, so based on your user agent, we detect which site to take you to. So you can either see the mobile side if you come in with your iPhone, or you can go to the desktop side if you come in from your laptop. So basically what we do, or what we're trying to get actually, is we have a single folder where we share all the code in the front end. So that as you can see here in the styles, for example, we can have core styles that apply across both mobile and desktop. And we want to be able to reuse those across the different applications. And then we have code that's very specific to mobile and very specific to desktop. And then between the base styles, you just have your base scaffolding typography, just the base HTML tags. And then some layout stuff, like how does a module, like a button, will look inside the header. And then you have your modules, like the card, checkboxes, your form fields, and your different components. And then states, just like Joshua said, they allow you to change how your modules look like. And then we have tools like mixins and functions and placeholders and stuff like that. So also something that we like to do is we want to use classes for styling and styling only. What does that mean? Well, here you may start in a page, and then you come in, you're a developer, you start looking at this page, and somebody asks you to change this, and you go, oh, well, look at that, there's a navigation class here. Well, I need to change that. Maybe I want to call it something else, navigation Christian, why not? And then, but what you don't realize is that from the HTML, it's not obvious what's going on behind the scenes. It's not obvious if there's some JavaScript tied to that element. It's not very predictable. You don't know. You're scared, right? You want to ask some guy that knows about this application. What happens here? Like I can't change this thing, man, because I'm not sure, right? So what we do is you want to be able to use hooks, and it's not just JavaScript. You can also have functional tests that are typed, that are hooked to your elements. So you don't even know what's going on. So what we do instead is we use prefix class names or IDs for JavaScript. Right, so we use JS, and probably if you guys read a lot of blogs, this is a lot of things that people recommend to do. So we prefix our navigation item with a JS, and that tells me right away what the intention of this code is. Here are some styling classes with navigation styles the code, and then JS, that means there's some JavaScript tied to this element. And if I wasn't trying to change the JavaScript, then there's no need for me to do that. If I'm just trying to change the presentation, I just have to change, if I wanted to change the class, and then I would change that. I will go into the CSS and change it. So it's very obvious to me what's going on here. I meant to delete that, but yeah. So name your classes with logical structure, right? We use BEM, a flavor of BEM, to do that. But really, it all comes down to these three things, I think. You want to build CSS that assumes as very little as possible of your HTML structure. And then just your CSS modules should really represent that thing and that thing only. And if you need to change it, use modifiers. And if you need to lay it around, use layouts. That's it. Those are pretty much the principles that we follow. So here I have a slide where I can show you all the different stack that we use out of F. And this is just a subset. So we are Git. We use GitHub. We use Bower and Node NPM to manage dependencies. We use Grunt and Gulp. We use HTML5. And our JavaScript, we use Marinate, React. We started exploring a lot of React recently. We use Browserify to modularize our JavaScript. And we do static analysis with JSHint, JSCS, CSS-lint, a lot of cool stuff. And we do unit testing with Karma, Mocha, Shy, and Simon. And we use Backup, and we use SAS. And finally, just for the sake of completion, here is our browser summary, our throughput. So Safari 8.0 is our top browser, and now, if I'm not wrong, that's tablet Safari. And Chrome follows after IE 11. A lot of modern users here. I don't see IE8 either. I don't know if this is IE8, but that's what we get from the stats. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Joshua again. So fortunately, I've had the opportunity to work with both of these individuals, and all I can say is that they, along with the other teams, are very passionate about what they do. And we welcome any questions that you guys might have now for either Joshua or Christian, or in general. I'll even second the bet to Mike Richard, so you might be going home happy.
It'll be expensive.
Are there any questions? Front-end dev, back-end dev, HBC in general.
Is there anyone that focuses on front end here? Just curious. Dedicated kind of front end developers.
Okay. So if there's no questions, I guess.
In-house questions?
Yeah,
So-
we're gonna get you back.
Yeah, it's just a general question. What was your biggest challenge when you were moving, because you started with a messed up environment and structure and CSS and so forth. So how you brought it into using SAS and all that kind of new technology?
Well, we
What
carved
was the challenges and how do you go about it?
We carved our way through it. So we identified different components and we committed to changing that. It's very difficult when you have like a really messy code to change that. Our mobile site, fortunately, was from scratch, so that was awesome. We were able to just use whatever we wanted to use. But right now, the strategy that we're applying to our desktop site is that we're carving through the different components of the site and applying that. So the challenge that we faced actually was we made the decision of changing the header and footer first before the middle part of the site. And that affected every single page on offif.com, right? So that was very challenging, especially since we're trying to bringing in things like React and Backbone and later better versions of jQuery and stuff like that. And they weren't backward compatible with some of the components that were used in Offif. So it's really just committed about it, man, and just carving your way into it. Just but that's really what we've been doing, just putting a lot of passion into it.
That's a good question. How is QA integrated? Everybody does it a little differently. How much is expected of a developer versus a third-party QA resource?
That's a good question. Something that I'm trying to promote in my team is we do have a separate QA team. And they do the functional tests, they do the automated tests, and they also do the manual tests. But something that I feel right now is there's a huge gap between a developer and the QA. And sometimes they're not even aware of the changes that we're making. They know like by the stories and stuff like that, but they don't understand technically, I think maybe how we approached it. And that makes it very difficult to write functional tests, especially if we're changing selectors and stuff like that. That breaks the function of such a work. So something I'm trying to promote now is bringing that closer to the developer and still allowing QA to do their work, right? So there will be another net behind everything. Maybe they'll grab something that we're missing that we didn't test for. So what we're exploring right now is using in Node Cucumber.js with Selenium WebDriver, and I wanted to try Casper, but then Casper only supported Phantom. So Selenium at least gives you the flexibility of choosing other browsers. But yeah, that's really where we're at right now.
And then I can expand on that too, just because, as Mike mentioned, we have the different banners, and they're all sort of, in their own place. And Lord and Taylor and Hudson's Bay, we're modernizing it, making it better, and so we run integration tests on all of our code. We actually have an HBC, an integration group that they use Selenium, and they have the tests that they run. But to answer your question about QA, for us, whenever we finish something, a developer does their coding, everything is done in an agile environment. We have in stories, and then it goes to the QA stage, which is deployed to an environment that QA can look at and do their tests and send us bugs that way.
Is that work all encapsulated in a single iteration, or is there like are they stacked? So you're sending stuff to QA while you're already on to the next set of stories? Yeah. Cool.
Questions? So I have to say, at HBC, we're very happy to be in the Meetup space. We're going to be continuing to host Meetups. We have another one coming up in June, I believe. So if you're not already, listening in on the HBC Digital Technology Meetup group or on LinkedIn, please follow us. I mean, we're going to try to make them as frequent as possible, and with topics that people are interested in hearing about. There's plenty of technology to go around here, and we're kind of just getting the feel, and we welcome any feedback as well. So, are there any other questions? Sure.
Could all three of you tell me your favorite thing about working at HBC Digital?
You.
Yeah.
I can answer that. So, Mike covered this a little bit, but really what I like about it is that we're sort of in an area where there is a lot of opportunity for development. I like that the different banners, we all kind of like explore different frameworks that we're using and different technologies. And so it provides a developer a really great playground to test and explore and expand their knowledge on, obviously as Christian showed, like he showed a slide with like all the tools that they're using in the front end space. Like there's a lot of them, and they all try to approach these problems in their own way. And it's great that having an environment where we can explore that and figure out what's best for our project and our needs.
There's always a honeymoon period when you start a new job and you wake up every morning excited to go to that job, and it literally lasts for a short period of time. I've been here a few years now, and I wake up excited to go to work every single day, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So that's due to everything that happens at work, whether it's the challenges in the tasks or the teams I'm working with, or the values and trajectory that we're on.
Yeah, we got a great group of people. The dynamics, the diversity is awesome. Everybody's very passionate, as you can see, about what we do. I love that we can bring in any code, any frameworks, and we can try them out, POC them, talk within the team about them, then try them out in production. And I love that we have a ping pong table. It's awesome. And it's just great, you know, it's just a really great environment, a really great bunch of people that really work with us, and is very passionate about development, very passionate about bringing the web forward, which is awesome.
Thanks, guys.
So I think everyone's welcome to come back and hang out a little bit and just network for yourselves.
Drinks?
Yeah.
Good job, guys. You did a great.